Hey guys, I have a 2006 Polaris Sportsman 800 fuel injected. This is going to be a similar process if you have like anywhere between a 2005, maybe 2006 to 2009 Polaris Sportsman 500. I think maybe a 400 or a 450, 600. This should be the same thing if you know, regardless of the model that you're having, if you're having the same issue that I am. So in this case, this Polaris Sportsman sat for years with a full tank of gas, and it just wasn't running. So when I bought it, I went through, I pulled the tank, I cleaned up and replaced the fuel pump and the fuel pressure regulator. The issue is that the fuel pressure regulator housing was cracked. You know, they do that if they set with time, the gas just disintegrates the housing for those. The problem is you can't buy the fuel pressure regulator housing. You can buy the fuel pressure regulator, but if your housing is screwed or if it's disintegrated, then the only offering that I think Polaris offers is a tank with the fuel sending unit assembly complete inside. You cannot buy a fuel pressure regulator housing. You can't buy the fuel pressure sending unit. You can buy a new pump and rebuild it. The housing, however, the plastic housing, you cannot find anywhere. I have searched the internet until I was blue. You can't find it. It's kind of unfortunate. So here's what I did. I pulled the pump. I went through and I found an alternative for it. I've got the tank right here, and I've got my unit right here. Now this is the housing I was talking about that is really hard to find. However, someone posted online that you can buy a fuel sending unit for a 1999 Ford Explorer. Now the fuel pressure regulator housing typically sits right here. I pulled it off. It's pretty much the exact same build as the Polaris Sportsman. It's got a hose right here, the plastic housing sits right here, and then it connects to the fuel pump. Pretty similar. I'm wondering if Polaris designed it based on this model. So what I did is I pulled the fuel pressure regulator housing from my unit, my Polaris Sportsman, and it's cracked right here. It just leaks out. The PSI on my Sportsman, even with a new pump, was like 10 PSI. So it just wasn't getting enough fuel pressure because this was the issue. New pressure regulator, it doesn't matter. The housing is cracked and leaking. So what I did is I bought a new one of these for about 40 bucks from eBay for a 1999 Ford Explorer, and I just rebuilt it using that housing right there. That is from the 1999 Ford Explorer fuel sending unit. I basically just connected it. It's really easy. You just undo these are actually the same hoses. These hoses right here are from the Ford Explorer unit and that housing. In fact, I just left that fuel pressure regulator attached even. I basically just swapped it. So that's an alternative. If you cannot find the fuel pressure regulator housing for your Polaris Sportsman, you can buy a Polaris or a Ford Explorer 1999 model year, get the whole unit and just take off the fuel pressure regulator housing with its hoses and just attach it and go from there. So it's kind of unfortunate. I'm just going to throw the rest of this Ford Explorer pump away. I have no use for it. I don't have a Ford Explorer. So yeah, 40 bucks, you can get a new pump and then just use that fuel pressure regulator housing. Kind of a workaround, but unless you want to, do a fuel pressure regulator out like externally, you'd have to feed it back in to the pump somehow, the fuel pressure or the fuel that's routed back to the fuel pump. You just have to figure out a way to get it back into the tank, but I didn't want to do that. 40 bucks seemed like it was worth it to me to get my Polaris Sportsman running again. So I'll throw it back in the tank and see how it runs. Okay, so got the fuel pump reconnected, Got my fuel pressure tester right here. I've got it connected right there to the Schrader valve, which is nice about this model. By the way, not all of them have that, just particular ones. I'm not sure which ones. Looks like we're hitting about 44, 45 PSI. So might be a little bit higher than normal, but that is what I just needed it to work. And if it's a little bit of PSI more than stock, then I'm good with it. It wasn't 80. I hooked up the pump to make sure it was good, and I was getting 80 PSI. And with this housing and the fuel pressure regulator from the Ford Explorer, I'm getting about 45. So I'm going to put this all back together, but that is an alternative if you have lost the fuel pressure regulator housing for your Polaris Sportsman.